My wedding vanished with a text message, as if my mother was canceling a lunch date rather than detonating 18 months of planning. Worse, she told everyone I had called it off, so my brother could throw his engagement party on the exact same day. They expected me to roll over like always. Instead, I married the love of my life anyway and disappeared before they could even try to stop me. My name is Lila Barnes, and I was standing in the austere, fluorescent-lit restroom of the King County Superior Court when the life I had meticulously built began to dismantle itself. It was 2:14 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I remember the time because I had been checking my watch every 30 seconds, anxious to get back to the summary judgment hearing waiting for me in courtroom 4B. I was 29 years old, a third-year law student functioning as a legal intern, and I was currently scrubbing blue ink off my thumb with gritty, industrial-grade powdered soap that smelled like artificial lemons and bleach. The silence of the restroom was heavy, broken only by the dripping of a faucet 3 sinks down. I was staring at my reflection in the mirror, adjusting the collar of my charcoal blazer, trying to summon the persona of a competent, unshakable attorney. I needed to look like someone who did not let emotions bleed into facts. I needed to look like someone who had control. Then my phone vibrated against the marble countertop. It was a single buzz, short and dismissive. I almost ignored it. My supervisor was strict about technology during proceedings, and I had 90 seconds before I needed to be back in my seat behind the counsel table. But the screen lit up, and the preview message caught my eye before the screen went dark again. It was from my mother. "Lydia, your wedding is postponed." I froze. The water from the automatic faucet cut off with a sharp click, plunging the room back into silence. My hands were still wet, dripping onto the pristine floor tiles, but I did not reach for a paper towel. I stared at the black screen of my phone as if it were an unexploded ordnance. "Your wedding is postponed." It was not a question. It was not a request for a conversation. It was a declarative sentence. 4 words delivered with the casual brutality of a weather report. I blinked, sure that I had misread it. Perhaps she meant a vendor meeting. Perhaps she meant the dress fitting scheduled for the upcoming weekend. I swiped the screen open, my wet thumb leaving a smear across the glass, and unlocked the phone. There was no follow-up text, no explanation, just that single line sitting in the gray bubble. I typed back, my fingers clumsy and cold. "What are you talking about?" The 3 ellipsis bubbles appeared immediately. She had been waiting for me to reply. She had been holding her phone, ready to manage my reaction. "Micah and Savannah set a date for their engagement party," she replied. "It is going to be a big one, a real blowout. They finally secured the venue Savannah has been dreaming of." I frowned, the confusion knitting tight behind my eyes. "That is great for them," I typed, trying to keep my heart rate steady. "But what does that have to do with my wedding?" The bubbles danced again. Longer this time. "The only date the venue had available is October 14th. October 14th, my date. The date Cal and I had secured 18 months ago. The date that was printed on the thick, cream-colored cardstock invitations sitting in a box on my dining room table, stamped and ready to be mailed out tomorrow morning. The date we had built our entire year around, saving every extra dime, picking up overtime shifts, declining vacations, all to pay for the vineyard ceremony we had dreamed of since the 2nd year of our relationship. I felt a strange sensation in my chest, like the air pressure in the room had suddenly dropped. I typed back, faster now. "Mom, October 14th is my wedding day. You know that. Everyone knows that." Her response was immediate, as if she had pre-written it to save time. "I know, honey, but this is the only date the venue has for the entire season. You know how Savannah gets when she has her heart set on something. She has been so stressed lately, and Micah really wants to give her this. It is important for his confidence." I stared at the words. Important for his confidence. My brother was 26 years old. He was a man who had never held a job for longer than 6 months. A man whose every mistake was cushioned by our parents, whose every whim was treated as a mandate. "I cannot move my wedding." "Mom," I typed, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. "The deposits are paid. The vendors are booked. Guests have already requested time off work." The phone buzzed again. Don't be dramatic. Leela, it is just a party. You have not sent the invitations yet. I checked. You can easily push yours back to the spring. It will be better weather anyway. Besides, it is gracious to step aside for your brother. You know he needs the spotlight right now. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not anger yet. It was something colder, something more paralytic. It was the sensation of watching a car crash in slow motion and realizing you are the one in the driver's seat. She was asking me to cancel a wedding I had spent 2 years planning so my brother could throw a party on the same day. No, I typed. The word looked small on the screen. I am not doing that. Tell them to pick another date. I waited. The bubbles did not appear for a long time. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. I could hear the door to the courtroom hallway open and close. The muffled sound of a bailiff calling a docket number. I needed to go back. I had a job. I had responsibilities. But I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the absolute insanity of the conversation. Finally, the phone buzzed. I already told Aunt Carol and the cousins that you decided to postpone. The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the sink, the porcelain digging into my palms. She had not just asked me, she had executed it. She had gone behind my back, before even speaking to me, and begun the process of dismantling my life to pave the road for Micah. She had planted the narrative. If I fought back now, I would not be the victim. I would be the difficult sister, the one causing drama, the one refusing to coordinate with the family. She had checkmated me before I even knew we were playing a game. I read the message again. I already told Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol was the town crier. If Carol knew, the entire extended family knew. By now, 500 miles away, people were likely erasing the date from their calendars, shaking their heads, whispering about how Lila must be having cold feet, or financial trouble, or relationship issues with Cal. My mother had not just canceled a date. She had humiliated me. I looked at my reflection again. The woman in the mirror looked the same dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, same tailored suit, same pearl earrings. But behind the eyes, something was screaming. I typed one last message. We are not postponing. I did not wait for her reply. I could not look at it. If I looked at it, I would scream. And if I screamed, I would lose my internship. And if I lost my internship, I would lose the career I had worked harder for than Micah had worked for anything in his entire life. I shoved the phone into the inner pocket of my blazer, right against my heart. It felt heavy, like a stone. I grabbed a paper towel, dried my hands aggressively, and threw the paper into the trash can with more force than necessary. I walked out of the restroom and into the hallway. The air was cooler here, smelling of floor wax and old paper. I walked toward courtroom 4B. My heels clicked against the linoleum, a steady, rhythmic sound that felt completely disconnected from the chaos swirling in my brain. Inside the courtroom, the hearing was already in motion. My supervising attorney, a sharp woman named Sarah with eyes that missed nothing, glanced at me as I slipped through the heavy oak double doors. She gave a microscopic nod, signaling me to take my seat. I sat down. I opened my legal pad. I uncapped my pen. My hands were trembling, just a fraction, a tiny tremor that only I could feel. Your Honor, the opposing counsel was saying, the defendant argues that the contract was breached in bad faith. The words floated through me. Bad faith, breach of contract. I looked down at my notes. The ink on the page seemed to blur. All I could see was the text message. Your wedding is postponed. My mother expected me to fold. That was the script. That had always been the script. Since we were children, I was the oak tree sturdy, silent, providing shade, and Micah was the orchid delicate, demanding, requiring a specific temperature and soil to survive. When Micah crashed my first car, a beat-up sedan I had bought with money from waiting tables, my parents had asked me not to be angry because he was shaken up. When Micah failed his college classes, I was asked to tutor him, to rewrite his essays, to fix it. I had spent 29 years fixing it, but this was not a dented fender. This was my life. This was Cal, who worked 24-hour shifts in an ambulance to pay for the venue deposit, Cal, who held me when I cried from exhaustion during finals week, Cal, who looked at me not as a resource to be mined, but as a person to be cherished. My mother was not just asking me to move a party. She was asking me to tell Cal that he mattered less than Micah. She was asking me to tell myself that my happiness was secondary to Micah's ego. I sat there in the courtroom, surrounded by the machinery of justice, and I felt something snap. It was not a loud break. It was not a hysterical explosion. It was quiet. It was the sound of a structural beam finally giving way under a weight it was never designed to carry. It was an ancient, exhausted part of me, the part that still desperately wanted to be the good daughter, the part that craved her approval, the part that believed if I just sacrificed enough, they would finally love me as much as they loved him dying. The opposing counsel finished his argument. My supervisor stood up. "Ms. Barnes," she whispered to me, gesturing for a file. "The affidavit." I reached into my briefcase. My hand brushed against the pocket where my phone lay. I could feel it radiating heat, or perhaps that was just my imagination. I pulled out the file and handed it to her. My hand was steady now. The numbness was spreading, coating my nerves like ice. I was not going to cry. I was not going to call her and beg. I was not going to argue about fairness. She had told Aunt Carol I had postponed. She had lied to the family to force my hand. She believed that by removing my option to say no, she had won. She believed that shame would make me compliant. She was wrong. I watched the judge flip through the pages of the affidavit. I watched the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light coming from the high windows. I felt a strange, cold clarity settling over me. If she wanted a postponed wedding, she could have one, but she was not going to get the obedience she felt entitled to. She had detonated the bridge between us. She just did not know it yet because the smoke had not cleared. I took a breath, inhaling the scent of old wood and justice. I picked up my pen and wrote a single word on the margin of my legal pad. No, it was a small word, but staring at it, inked in black against the yellow paper, it looked like the most powerful thing I had ever written. I focused back on the hearing. I took notes. I handed exhibits. I performed my duties with mechanical precision, but part of me was already gone, already 5 steps ahead, planning a war I had never wanted to fight but now refused to lose. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I did not check it. I knew what it would say. It would be another justification, another manipulation, another shovel full of dirt on the grave of our relationship. Let it buzz. Let them plan their party. Let them tell their lies. I was Lila Barnes. I was a problem solver. I was the one who kept the cars insured and the bills paid. I was the one who kept the family running. And today, for the first time in my life, I was going to stop running it. I looked at the clock on the courtroom wall. 2:30 in the afternoon. The hearing would be over in 45 minutes. Then I would walk out of this courthouse, I would get into my car, and I would drive to the fire station to see Cal. And then, we were going to make a decision that would burn the rest of the bridges my mother hadn't already torched. I turned the page of my legal pad. The sound was crisp and final. The wedding was not postponed. The daughter she thought she knew was just gone. My job as a compliance analyst at Redwood Meridian Consulting is essentially the professional art of worrying. I spend 40, sometimes 50 hours a week combing through data sets, regulatory frameworks, and operational protocols to identify where the cracks are before the foundation gives way. It is a career built entirely on the premise of over-preparing. If there is a risk, I find it. If there is a loophole, I close it. I am paid a salary to ensure that nothing unexpected ever happens. It is not just what I do, it is who I have become. My entire life is a series of contingency plans layered over one another, a fortress designed to keep chaos at bay. This need for order is exactly how I met Cal Bennett. It was 3 years ago during a corporate safety training seminar I was facilitating. I was running a CPR certification course for the staff, a requirement for our new insurance policy. The room was filled with board consultants checking their emails under the tables and glancing at the clock. And then there was Cal. He was a guest instructor, a paramedic who had been brought in to demonstrate the proper technique because my firm believed in expert visualization. I remember watching him kneel beside the plastic dummy. He did not treat it like a chore. He moved with an economy of motion that fascinated me. He was calm, precise, and completely present. When he looked up and caught me staring at his hands, he did not smile firmly or posture. He just gave me a small, knowing nod. Later, while I was obsessively wiping down the mannequins with disinfectant wipes because I could not stand the idea of germs lingering, he stayed behind to help. He told me that he had never seen someone attack a plastic torso with such vengeance. I told him that I preferred a sterile environment. He laughed, a warm, grounding sound that seemed to vibrate in my chest, and told me that life was rarely sterile. But he liked my effort. We have been together ever since. Cal is the only person in my life who does not need me to fix him. He spends his 12-hour shifts pulling people out of car wrecks and stabilizing heart attacks. Yet he comes home with a gentleness that undoes the knots in my shoulders. We spent the last 2 years building a future together, brick by brick. We are not rich. We do not come from money. Every dollar for our wedding was saved from his overtime shifts and my quarterly performance bonuses. We opened a joint high-yield savings account specifically for the event, nicknaming it the Vineyard Fund. We wanted something small. We did not want a ballroom or a crystal chandelier. We wanted the rustic warmth of a vineyard in October, with long wooden tables, local wine, and the smell of autumn leaves in the air. We planned for 80 guests. We budgeted for a photographer who specialized in natural light. We tasted 6 different caterers before deciding on a menu that felt like a family dinner rather than a banquet. It was modest, but it was ours. It was the one thing in my life that was just for me, a celebration of the one relationship that did not require me to sacrifice a piece of myself to keep it afloat. Or at least, I thought it was. To understand why my mother's text message felt less like a change of plans and more like a physical blow. You have to understand the architecture of my family. I grew up as the designated problem solver. In the unspoken contract of the Barnes household, I was the structural support beam. I was the one who reminded my father to renew the car insurance. I was the one who balanced the checkbook when my mother could not figure out why the numbers were in the red. I was the one who mediated arguments, smoothed over awkward social interactions, and ensured that the family appeared functional to the outside world. I learned early on that my value was directly tied to my utility. If I was useful, I was good. If I was low maintenance, I was loved. And then there was Micah. My brother is 26 years old, 3 years my junior, but in the emotional landscape of our family, he is perpetually 6, from the moment he was born. Micah was framed as fragile. My mother loved to use words like sensitive, artistically tempered, and misunderstood to describe him. If Micah failed a math test, it was because the teacher did not understand his learning style. If Micah quit the soccer team mid-season because he did not like the coach's tone, it was because he had too much integrity to be yelled at. He was never held accountable for his actions. Instead, his failures were treated like weather patterns. You do not blame the rain for ruining a picnic. You blame the person who forgot the umbrella. In our house, Micah was the storm, and I was the umbrella holder. It was my job to keep everyone dry, even if I had to stand in the downpour to do it. The clearest memory I have of this dynamic, the moment I realized I was not a daughter, but a second parent, happened when I was 17 and Micah was 14. I had worked all summer waiting tables at a greasy spoon diner to buy my first car. It was a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper and an air conditioner that only worked when the car was moving faster than 40 miles per hour. But I loved it. It was my freedom. It was the physical manifestation of my hard work. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, while I was at debate club practice, Micah took my keys from the kitchen counter. He did not have a license. He did not have a permit. He just wanted to go to the arcade at the mall. He made it less than 2 miles before he hydroplaned into a guardrail. When my father drove us to the scene, the car was totaled. The front end was crumpled like a piece of tinfoil. Steam was rising from the engine block into the cold rain. My heart stopped. I remember running toward the wreckage, terrified that my brother was dead. Micah was sitting on the curb, wrapped in a blanket a police officer had given him, sobbing, not silently weeping, but wailing. He did not have a scratch on him. I stood there, looking at my car, my hours of sweating in a diner, my freedom, my property destroyed, anger, hot and righteous, flared in my chest. I opened my mouth to scream, to ask him what he was thinking, to demand why he stole my keys. But before I could get a single word out, my mother was there. She was not rushing to me. She was rushing to him. She enveloped Micah in her arms, shushing him, stroking his hair. Then she looked up at me. Her eyes were not filled with apology for what her son had done to me. They were hard, warning me to stay back. "Lila, look at him," she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "He is traumatized. He is shaking. Do not you dare say a word about that stupid car. He could have been killed." I froze. My father stood behind her, looking at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze. "He is just a boy," my mother continued, turning back to coo at Micah. "He made a mistake. We are just glad you are safe, baby. We are just glad you are safe." In the car ride home, Micah cried in the front seat while my mother held his hand. I sat in the back, silent. When we got to the house, Micah went straight to his room to play video games to calm his nerves. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. My mother came in a few minutes later. She did not offer to help me replace the car. She did not offer to have Micah work off the debt. Instead, she put a hand on my shoulder and sighed. "You need to apologize to your brother," she said. I looked at her, truly thinking I had lost my hearing. "Excuse me, he thinks you are mad at him," she said, as if this was the greatest tragedy of the evening. "He is upstairs crying because he thinks you hate him. You know how sensitive he is. Go tell him it is okay. Ideally, tell him you were thinking of selling the car anyway." And I did it. I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling like lead. I knocked on his door. I sat on the edge of his bed while he played his game, and I told him it was fine. I told him not to worry. I told him I was not angry. I soothed the person who had stolen from me and destroyed my property because that was my role. I swallowed my rage until it turned into a hard, dense stone in the pit of my stomach, a stone I had been carrying around for 12 years. That dynamic never changed. It only evolved. As we became adults, the stakes got higher. It was no longer about cars. It was about jobs, apartments, and relationships. When Micah got fired from his third job in a year for creative differences with his manager, my parents paid his rent for 6 months so he would not feel pressured to take a job beneath his dignity. When I got a promotion, the conversation at dinner would inevitably pivot to how hard Micah was trying to find his passion, ensuring I did not shine too brightly and make him feel inadequate. I thought I had managed it. I thought that by moving out, by getting a demanding job, by building a life with Cal, I had created enough distance to protect myself. I thought I could love them from afar, participate in the family rituals without being consumed by them. Then Savannah arrived. Savannah Vaughn entered our lives 18 months ago, and she did not just fit into the existing dysfunction, she weaponized it. Savannah is a woman who treats life like a performance art piece where she is the director, the star, and the critic. She met Micah at a gallery opening where he was pretending to be interested in buying art with money he did not have. Within a month, they were inseparable. Savannah saw Micah not for who he was, a man-child suspended in a state of arrested development, but for who he could be to her, a devoted worshiper. And she saw my parents for exactly what they were, enablers who were desperate for their son to be successful in any capacity. Savannah understood the assignment immediately. She leaned into the narrative that Micah was a genius held back by a cruel world. She fed my mother's delusion that Micah deserved the best of everything. But unlike my brother, who was chaotic and aimless, Savannah was calculated. She had a vision. She wanted the status, the image, the Instagram-perfect life, and she saw the Barnes family resources as the means to get it. She viewed me not as a future sister-in-law, but as a competitor for resources. She noticed that when I spoke, my father listened. She noticed that I was the one who organized the family gatherings. She noticed that I was the competent one, and she decided that there was not enough room on the stage for two leading ladies. It started subtly. Comments about my clothes being too corporate, remarks about my job being boring, but once the wedding planning started, the temperature in the room changed. Savannah would look at my venue choices and offer a pitying smile. "Oh, a vineyard," she would say, swirling her wine glass. "That is quaint, very rustic. I suppose not everyone wants a black tie affair." She began to plant seeds in my mother's mind. Seeds that I was being selfish for having a wedding when Micah was still finding his footing. Seeds that the family should really be focusing their energy on helping Micah and her get established. I brushed it off. I told Cal she was just insecure. I told myself that my mother would never actually let Savannah dictate family policy. I told myself that there was a line they would not cross. But standing in that courthouse hallway, feeling the phantom vibration of the phone against my chest, I realized how naive I had been. There was no line. There never had been. My wedding was not just a celebration to them. It was a resource. It was a pile of attention, money, and calendar space that Micah wasn't getting. And in the economy of my family, Micah getting 0 while I got 100 was an injustice that had to be corrected. Savannah had likely whispered in my mother's ear that it was unfair for Lila to have her big day while Micah and she were just starting their journey. She probably pulled up the venue website, sighed, and said, "If only we could find a place like this, but they are all booked. It is a sign we should just wait." And my mother, predictable as gravity, had stepped in to fix the weather. I walked back toward the council table, my heels silent on the carpet. I looked at the legal pad where I had written the word no. For 29 years, I had been the compliance analyst of my own family. I had followed the rules. I had mitigated the risks. I had ensured that the institution of the Barnes family did not collapse under the weight of Micah's incompetence. But a compliance analyst knows one thing above all else when a system is fundamentally broken. You do not keep patching it. You shut it down. I sat down next to my supervisor and picked up my pen. My hand was steady. My heart was a block of ice. I was done being the umbrella. It was time to let it rain. Looking back, I should have seen the text message coming. It was not a sudden lightning strike from a clear blue sky. It was the final thunderclap of a storm that had been gathering on the horizon for months. The erosion of my boundaries had been slow, methodical, and disguised as maternal concern. A masterclass in gaslighting that left me questioning my own reality long before I stood in that courthouse bathroom. The psychological warfare began not with a shout, but with a color swatch. About 3 months before the date, my mother, Lydia, insisted on joining me for a meeting with the florist. I had hesitated. Cal and I had a clear vision for the aesthetic muted earth tones: dusty sage, pale lavender, and cream. We wanted the vineyard to feel organic, not manicured, but my mother had played the guilt card, sighing about how she just wanted to be involved, how she felt shut out of her only daughter's big moment. So, I invited her. Within 10 minutes of sitting down in the florist's studio, Lydia reached into her purse and pulled out a fabric square. It was not sage or lavender. It was a violently bright shade of teal, bordering on neon. "I think we need to pivot," she told the florist, ignoring the mood board I had spent weeks curating. "The muted tones are a bit depressing. Do not you think they look like dried weeds? This teal is vibrant. It photographs better. It screams celebration." I stared at her. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice level, "that is not our palette. We are going for a rustic look." Lydia waved her hand dismissively. "Rustic is just a polite word for cheap. Lila, you want elegance. You want impact. Besides, Savannah mentioned the other day that teal is the color of the season. She has such a good eye for these things." There it was. The name dropped like a subtle poison in the water supply. Savannah. At the time, I brushed it off as my mother trying to bond with her future daughter-in-law by adopting her opinions. I firmly told the florist to stick to the original plan, and my mother spent the rest of the ride home sulking, staring out the window and muttering about how I was too rigid for my own good. But after that, the insertions became more frequent and more aggressive. It was death by 1,000 suggestions. I would choose a playlist for the reception, focusing on classic soul and indie folk, the music Cal and I cooked dinner to. A week later, my mother would send me a link to a top 40 DJ who charged $4,000 a night, heavily implying that my music taste would put the guests to sleep. "You need energy." She would text me at 11 at night. "Savannah says a live DJ is non-negotiable for a real party." It was always phrased that way. Not what I might like, but what a real party required, according to the Gospel of Savannah. Then came the dinners. Sunday night dinners at my parents' house had always been mandatory, a ritual performance of family unity. But as my wedding date approached, the dynamic at the table shifted. The conversation stopped being about our lives and started becoming a covert planning session for a party that did not exist yet, or so I thought. Micah would sit across from me, picking at his roast chicken, looking bored until the topic of my wedding came up. Then, he would become an armchair psychologist. One evening, while I was talking about the stress of finalizing the seating chart, Micah leaned back in his chair and looked at me with a pitying expression that made my skin crawl. "Are you sure you are ready for this, Lee?" he asked. I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. "Ready for what?" "The seating chart." "No," he said, dragging the word out. "Marriage. You just seem so high-strung lately. You are obsessing over details. It feels like you are compensating for something. Are you sure you and Cal are emotionally aligned, I mean, really aligned?" I looked at Cal, who was sitting next to me, his jaw tightening. Cal worked 60 hours a week saving lives. I worked in corporate compliance. We were the definition of aligned. We were a fortress. "Micah," I said, my voice sharp, "we are fine. Planning a wedding is stressful. That is normal." Micah shook his head, looking at our mother. "See? She gets defensive so fast. It worries me. Mom, I just want her to be happy. But she seems so brittle. Instead of shutting him down, instead of telling her unemployed son to stop analyzing the relationship of the sister who had bailed him out of jail and debt more times than I could count." Lydia nodded sympathetically. "He has a point." "Lila," she said softly, "you have been very on edge. Maybe you should scale back. Do you really need such a big production?" I put my fork down. "It is 80 people. Mom, it is not a production. It is a wedding." "But does it need to be this wedding?" she pressed. "The vineyard, the sit-down dinner, the open bar. It is all so extravagant. You know, there is nothing wrong with being practical. You could do something smaller. A backyard thing. Save the money for a house. Or help the family." The implication hung in the air, heavy and rancid. Help the family. Meaning, help Micah. Meaning, why are you spending money on yourself when your brother needs it? I looked at my father. He was sitting at the head of the table, methodically cutting his meat. He heard every word. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew Cal and I were paying for this wedding ourselves, that we had not asked them for a dime. He knew his wife was undermining me. "Dad?" I asked. He looked up, his eyes sliding away from mine, focusing somewhere on the wallpaper behind me. "Listen to your mother, Lila. She just wants what is best for everyone." Silence. The sound of him chewing was the only answer I got. He was not malicious, but his cowardice hurt worse than their aggression. He was the bystander who watched the robbery and did nothing because he did not want to make a scene. The psychological warfare escalated from opinions to direct interference about 2 months out. I received a call from a cousin of mine, a sweet girl named Jenna who had grown up with us but managed to escape the family orbit by moving to Chicago. She called me late one Tuesday. Her voice lowered, as if she were telling me a state secret. "Lila, I do not want to start drama," she said, "but I saw Savannah at a brunch last weekend. She was talking about your venue. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What did she say?" "She called it cute," Jenna said, hesitating. "She said, It is a really cute spot for a starter wedding, you know, before the real one. I gripped the phone. A starter wedding. She told the whole table that you were rushing into it because you were turning 30 and panic settling. Jenna continued, her voice apologetic, and that she and Micah were planning the event of the century to show everyone how it is really done. Lila, she laughed about it, and your mom was there. She did not say anything. She just smiled and drank her mimosa. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark of my living room for an hour. It was not just that Savannah was cruel. I expected that. It was that my mother was complicit. She was letting this woman mock me, mock my relationship, mock the life I was building. All because Savannah was the golden goose who stroked Micah's ego. I tried to confront Lydia about it the next day. I tried to set a boundary. Mom, I heard what Savannah said about my wedding. I told her over the phone. Lydia let out a breathless, fake laugh. Oh, Lila. Stop listening to gossip. Savannah has a very dry sense of humor. You are being too sensitive. You know how she is. She is just high energy. She meant it as a compliment. A starter home is a good thing. Isn't it? Why do you always assume the worst? She twisted reality until I felt dizzy. Suddenly, I was the one lacking a sense of humor. I was the one reading malice into innocence. But the final blow, the moment I realized this was a hostile takeover, came when the invitations started getting lost. We had sent out the save the date 6 months prior, but as the formal invitations went out, I started getting messages from confused relatives. Hey Lila, my aunt texted, I got an email from your mom saying the date was TBD. I thought it was October 14th. Then another, Lila. Just checking. Are you guys changing the venue? Lydia mentioned something about a ballroom. I felt like I was losing my mind. I logged into my wedding email account, the one I used for vendors. I had given my mother the password months ago so she could check RSVPs. A gesture of trust I now bitterly regretted. I went into the sent folder. It was empty. She was too smart to leave a trail there, but she wasn't smart enough to check the trash folder. There, sitting at the top of the deleted items, was an email forwarded from my account to Savannah's personal email address. Subject guest list. Full data. I opened it. Attached was my master spreadsheet. Every name, every address, every phone number, and underneath the attachment, my mother had typed a message to Savannah. Here's the list. Sweetie, compare it with yours. We need to make sure the VIPs are prioritized for the big day. I will start softening up the extended family about the conflict. Do not worry about Lila's list. Most of these people would rather go to a real party anyway. I stared at the screen. The white light burned into my retinas. The conflict. The big day. Softening up. They weren't just being annoying. They weren't just being critical. They were actively poaching my guests. They were planning a counter-event on my specific date. Using my own contact list to do it. My mother was not confused. She was strategizing. She was handing over my social circle to Savannah like a dowry. I printed the email. My hands were shaking, not with sadness, but with a terrifying, cold rage. I realized then that I did not have a mother. I had a double agent. I changed the password to the email account immediately. I deleted the spreadsheet from the cloud. But the damage was done. They had the data. I sat there in my home office, surrounded by contracts and color swatches, and I realized the text message I would eventually receive in the courthouse restroom was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the result of a campaign. They had spent months devaluing my wedding, mocking my choices, and questioning my stability, all to pave the way for this moment. They needed me to be the unstable one so that when they stole my date, it would look like a mercy killing rather than a murder. I looked at the calendar on the wall. October 14th was circled in red marker. They thought they could erase it. They thought they could bully me into handing it over because I had spent 29 years handing everything over. I closed my laptop with a snap. They were about to find out that the compliance analyst had finished her audit, and the results were going to be catastrophic. I drove to my parents' house on a Thursday evening, 2 days after discovering the email my mother had forwarded to Savannah. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain that refused to fall, matching the pressure building behind my temples. I had the printout of the email tucked inside my purse, folded into a sharp square. I did not bring Cal. This was not a skirmish for a fiancé. This was a civil war, and I needed to stand on the front lines alone. When I walked into the kitchen, the scene was disarmingly normal. My father was reading a golf magazine at the island. My mother was stirring a pot of marinara sauce, the steam curling around her perfectly coiffed hair. It smelled like oregano and garlic, the scent of 1,000 childhood dinners where we pretended everything was fine. I did not sit down. I did not take off my coat. I stood in the doorway, a ghost haunting the living. "We need to talk about October 14th, I said. My mother did not turn around. She kept stirring, the wooden spoon scraping against the ceramic pot with a rhythmic, grating sound. "Oh, Lila," she said, her voice light and airy. "Can't we just have a nice dinner first? Your father bought that red wine you like." "I am not staying for dinner," I said, my voice steady. "I know what you are doing. I know you and Savannah are planning an engagement party for the same day as my wedding. I know you are inviting my guest list." The spoon stopped. The room went silent. My father slowly closed his magazine, looking from me to her, his face tightening with the anticipation of conflict he would inevitably try to ignore. Lydia turned around, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She did not look guilty. She looked annoyed, like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. "You are making it sound so sinister," she said, leaning against the counter. "It is not a conspiracy. Lila, it is a coincidence. The venue Micah found, the boathouse on the lake, only had that one Saturday available in October. You know how short the season is. It is not a coincidence." "Mom," I replied, "it is my wedding day. You cannot have a party for my brother on the day I am getting married. You have to tell them to move it," she sighed, a long, suffering exhale that seemed to deflate her entire posture. "We can't move it, Lila. It is too late. Micah is so excited. He finally feels like things are coming together for him. If we tell him he has to change the date now, it will crush him. You know how he gets when the rug is pulled out from under him. He spirals." I felt a vein throb in my neck. "He will spiral, Mom. I have contracts." I pulled the folder from my bag. Not the email this time, but the financial realities. I slammed the papers onto the granite island. "I have a signed contract with the vineyard. I have a signed contract with the caterer. I have a signed contract with the photographer. These are non-refundable deposits. Do you understand what that means?" Lydia waved a hand at the papers as if they were annoying insects. "Money," she scoffed. "That is all you ever talk about. Money, contracts, schedules. You are so cold sometimes. Lila, this is about family. This is about your brother's happiness. I am talking about $30,000. I said, pronouncing every syllable. "Cal and I have spent $30,000 of our own money. If we cancel, we lose it all. We cannot just write that off because Micah wants a party." Lydia crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "So that is it. You would bankrupt your relationship with your brother over money. You would really make him feel secondary on the one day he wants to shine." The room spun. The logic was so twisted it was almost impressive. "Make him feel secondary," I repeated, my voice rising for the first time. "It is my wedding day. By definition, he is secondary on that day. That is how weddings work." Lydia shook her head, looking at my father. "See," she said to him, "this is what I mean. She has no empathy. She thinks the world revolves around her just because she put on a white dress." My father cleared his throat, looking miserable. "Lila, honey, maybe you could compromise. Just look at the dates in the spring. Your mother says the flowers are better in April anyway." I looked at him, and the last shred of respect I held for his passivity disintegrated. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, hard and absolute. "No, I am not moving the date. I am not canceling the vendors. I am getting married on October 14th. If Micah wants to throw a party that day, he can go ahead, but I will not be there. And neither will anyone who actually cares about me." Lydia's face hardened. The mask of the concerned mother dropped, revealing the cold, calculating manager beneath. "You are being incredibly selfish," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You are forcing people to choose. Do you know how tacky that looks? Dividing the family like this. I am not the one dividing the family." I said, "I am the one sticking to the plan we have had for 18 months. My phone buzzed in my hand. Then it buzzed again, and again, a rapid-fire series of vibrations that usually meant an emergency. I looked down. It was a notification from Instagram. I had been tagged in a story. It was Savannah. I unlocked the phone, my thumb trembling slightly. The image on the screen was a professional-looking graphic, sleek and modern with gold lettering against a black background. It was a save-the-date announcement. Micah Savannah, the party of the year, 10/14. And underneath, in small, italicized text, she had written a caption that made the bile rise in my throat. "Real queens don't fight over dates. They elevate. So excited to celebrate our love with the people who truly matter." She had posted it, while I was standing here arguing. While my mother was stalling me, Savannah had gone public. They had coordinated this. My mother had likely texted her the moment I walked in the door. I turned the screen around and held it up to Lydia's face. "Did you tell her to post this?" I asked. Lydia glanced at the screen and shrugged. "She is just excited." "Leela, why do you have to read into everything? She is trying to be the bigger person. She is elevating. Maybe you should try it." The audacity was breathless. They were stealing my date, poaching my guests, and publicly framing me as the petty one for objecting, all within the span of 5 minutes. I put the phone back in my pocket. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of realizing I was in a cage with predators. "You are right," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I do need to elevate." I reached for the contracts on the counter and put them back in my bag. I zipped it shut. "I am keeping my date," I said, "and I'm going to make sure every single person on that guest list knows exactly why there are 2 invitations. I am done covering for Micah. I am done pretending this family is normal." Lydia laughed. A harsh, barking sound. "Oh, please, you won't say a word. You never do. You are too afraid of looking messy. You will complain, and you will cry, and then you will call the venue and move the date because you are the responsible one. That is who you are. Lila. You fix things. You don't break them." She took a step closer to me, her eyes boring into mine. "And let me tell you something else," she hissed. "This family cannot survive selfishness. If you make people choose between you and your brother, you are going to lose. Micah needs this. We need this. You have Cal. You have your job. You have your little life. Let Micah have this one thing." I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time in years. I saw the lines around her mouth, the desperate glint in her eyes. She was terrified. She knew Micah was a failure. She knew Savannah was a shark, and she knew that if she didn't feed the shark, it would eat her son. So she was feeding it me instead. I am not moving. "Mom," I said. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. "Lila," she called after me. "Lila, get back here. We are not done discussing this." I walked through the living room, past the family photos on the mantel, Micah smiling with his graduation diploma that I had practically earned for him, the family beach trip where I paid for the rental house. I walked out the front door and into the rain. I got into my car and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the ignition. I had to grip the steering wheel and breathe, counting to 10, trying to stop the world from tilting. I had expected them to deny it. I had expected them to apologize. I had even expected them to beg. I had not expected them to declare war. I started the car. The windshield wipers swiped back and forth, a metronome keeping time with my racing heart. Lydia was right about one thing. I was the one who fixed things. I was the one who smoothed over the cracks. I was the problem solver. But she was wrong about the rest. I wasn't afraid of looking messy anymore. As I pulled out of the driveway, leaving the house that had been my childhood home in the rearview mirror, I felt something inside me click into place. It was the sound of a lock engaging. The ancient, exhausted part of me that wanted their love was not just cracking, it was calcifying. It was turning into something harder, something sharper. They wanted October 14th. They could fight me for it, but I wasn't going to fight with text messages or passive-aggressive dinners. I was a compliance analyst. I fought with documentation. I fought with protocol. I fought with the absolute, unyielding weight of facts. I drove toward the highway, the rain blurring the lights of the city. I needed to get home to Cal. I needed to tell him that the diplomacy phase was over. My mother said the family couldn't survive selfishness. She was about to find out that it also couldn't survive the truth. I merged onto the interstate, my foot heavy on the gas. The shaking in my hands stopped. The tears I thought would come never arrived. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. It was a mistake they would not have the opportunity to make twice. When I walked through the front door of our apartment, Cal was sitting at the kitchen island. The only light came from the under-cabinet LEDs, casting long shadows across his face. He did not look up immediately. He was staring at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen, his posture rigid. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. The sound was loud, metallic, and final. Cal looked up then. His eyes were dark, not with fatigue from his shift, but with a cold, focused anger I had rarely seen directed at anyone, let alone my family. He did not say a word. He just held up his phone. On the screen was the screenshot I had sent him from the car. Savannah's Instagram story. Real queens don't fight over dates. They elevate. I walked over to him and sank onto the bar stool opposite him. I felt hollowed out, as if the confrontation with my mother had scooped out all my vital organs and replaced them with lead weights. I showed them the contracts. I said, my voice sounding thin in the quiet kitchen. I told them we would lose $30,000. I told them it was impossible to move, and Cal asked. His voice was low, a rumble in his chest. And Mom said the family cannot survive selfishness, I replied. She said if I make people choose, I will lose. She is framing it as me attacking Micah. Cal set the phone down on the counter. He placed it face down, as if the image of Savannah's smug graphic was physically toxic. He took a deep breath, the kind he took before intubating a patient in the back of a moving ambulance, steady, controlled, preparing for trauma. I watched his jaw muscles bunch and release. He was reading every message I had forwarded him, processing the entirety of the betrayal. He was connecting the dots that I had been too close to see: the comments about the venue, the lost invitations, the sudden concern for my emotional state. He reached across the island and took my hand. His palm was warm, rough with calluses. Lila, he said quietly, they are not asking you to move the date. They are daring you to keep it. I looked down at our joined hands. I know. He squeezed my fingers. So, what are you afraid of? And do not give me the lawyer answer. Give me the real answer. I closed my eyes. The truth was a terrifying thing to articulate. I am afraid that if I draw this line, they will never cross back over it. I whispered. I am afraid that my mother is right. I am afraid that if I force a choice, they will pick him. They always pick him. And I will be the orphan. I will be the one alone on Christmas. I will be the one they talk about in hushed tones at reunions as the bitter sister who ruined Micah's big moment. I opened my eyes. Tears were stinging the corners, hot and frustrating, but, I added, my voice gaining a fraction more steel, I am more terrified of what happens if I cave. If I move this wedding, Cal, I do not think I can ever look at myself in the mirror again. I will just be their doormat forever. I will be paying for Micah's mistakes until I am 80 years old. Cal nodded. He stood up and walked to the small bookshelf in the living room, where we kept the wedding binder, a thick white notebook containing every receipt, every contract, and every dream we had pinned to paper for the last 18 months. He brought it to the island and opened it. He flipped past the floral arrangements, past the menu samples, and landed on the financial section. He pointed to the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet, $32,450. He read, every dime of that came from us. Not them, us. He flipped to the venue contract, paragraph 4, section B. All deposits are non-refundable and non-transferable within 90 days of the event. He looked at me. We are 60 days out. We are locked in. I said. Cal closed the binder. The sound was sharp, like a gavel strike. Then the date stands, he said. It was not a question. It was a command. It was the most romantic thing he had ever said to me. He was not just defending a party. He was defending our autonomy. He was telling me that our unit, the family we were creating, was the priority. Okay, I said, the word exhaling out of me like a held breath. The date stands. Then we need to secure the perimeter, Cal said, slipping into his paramedic triage mode. If they are going to play dirty, we need to lock everything down. Tonight, I pulled out my laptop. The sorrow I had felt in the car began to recede, replaced by the familiar, cold comfort of professional competence. I was a compliance analyst. I knew how to secure assets. I dialed the number for the vineyard. It was late, almost 8 in the evening, but I knew Elena, our coordinator, often worked late during peak season. She answered on the second ring. Lila. Is everything okay, Elena? I need to make some immediate changes to our file. I said, my voice crisp. I could hear her typing in the background. Go ahead. I need to set a password on our account, I said. Effective immediately. No changes. Absolutely zero are to be made to the timeline, the vendor list, or the guest access, unless they come directly from me or Cal, and only if we provide the verbal password. Elena stopped typing. There was a pause. Is there a problem? Lila. My family is attempting to cancel my event, I said, keeping the statement flat and factual. They may call you pretending to be me, or claiming I am sick, or saying we have broken up. None of it is true. Unless you hear the word meridian, nothing changes. I understand, Elena said, her tone shifting from vendor to ally. I have seen this before. Sadly, I will flag the file in red. No one gets past the front gate without being on the list you provide. Thank you, I said. One more thing, Elena added. If you are expecting a hostile incursions, I strongly suggest you look at your guest list. If you have people on there who are going to bring drama, or who are going to report back to the people causing the drama, cut them. You want a wedding, Lila, not a hostage negotiation. I hung up and looked at Cal. He had heard her. He pulled the guest list out of the binder. It was a spreadsheet with 80 names, aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, people who had known me since I was a child, people who had received Savannah's save the date 2 days ago. We went through the list name by name, Aunt Carol, the town crier, the one my mother had already told I was postponing. If she came, she would spend the entire reception gossiping about why Micah wasn't there. Cut her, Cal said. I drew a line through her name, Cousin Mark, Micah's best friend. He would likely live stream the ceremony just to mock it for Savannah. Cut him, I said. We moved down the list with ruthless efficiency. It was a purge. We weren't just removing guests, we were removing liabilities. We were removing the spies, the enablers, the people who would sit in our chairs and judge us for not bowing to the family hierarchy. And then we reached the top of the list, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Barnes. My hand hovered over the paper. My parents. I looked at the names. I thought about my father sitting silently at the table while my mother dismantled my happiness. I thought about my mother forwarding my guest list to Savannah. I thought about the text message in the courthouse bathroom. If they come, Cal said softly, they will make a scene. Your mother will wear black. She will cry loudly during the vows. She will tell everyone who will listen that you forced her to choose. He was right. Their presence would be a protest. I remembered what my mother had said in the kitchen. This family cannot survive selfishness. She was right, but she had misidentified the source of the selfishness. I took the red pen. I did not scribble. I drew a single, clean line through Lydia Barnes and Robert Barnes. It felt like amputation. It was the severing of a limb to save the body. But as the ink dried, the pain was replaced by a strange, weightless sensation. Freedom. We cut the list from 80 down to 25. 25 people, our best friends, Cal's parents, who had been nothing but supportive, a few close colleagues, the people who actually knew us, the people who would cheer for us, not for the performance, but for the marriage. It was going to be a micro-wedding. I looked at the decimated list. It looked sparse. It looked lonely. It looks perfect, Cal said. He stood up and walked to the fridge. Pulling out a bottle of cheap sparkling water, he poured 2 glasses. Now, he said, tell them. I picked up my phone. I did not want a conversation. I did not want a debate. I needed to deliver a decree. I opened the group chat that included my mother, my father, and Micah. I typed the message slowly, ensuring every word was neutral. I stripped away the emotion. I stripped away the apologies. I stripped away the, I hope you understands. Cal and I have reviewed our contracts. They are non-refundable. We are keeping our wedding date of October 14th at the Vineyard as planned. We understand this conflicts with the party you have chosen to schedule. We will miss you. I hit send. I stared at the screen. Immediately, the 3 little gray dots appeared. They were typing. My heart hammered against my ribs. I braced myself for the explosion. I braced myself for the guilt trip, the rage, the accusations of being a terrible daughter, the threats of disownment. The bubbles danced. Then they stopped. Then they appeared again. Someone was typing a paragraph. Then they stopped again. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. The screen remained silent. There was no explosion. There was no screaming. They were not replying. I realized with a jolt that they were not stunned into silence. They were strategizing. They were likely on a conference call with Savannah right now, deciding how to spin this. They were deciding that if I was going to be defiant, I was no longer worth the effort of a text message. They were shunning me. I looked up at Cal. They are not replying. I said, good, Cal said, clinking his glass against mine. That means they heard you. I put the phone down on the counter. Face down. The silence from the phone was loud, filling the kitchen. It was the sound of a bridge burning. It was the sound of the safety net I had relied on for 29 years turning into ash. But as I took a sip of the sparkling water, looking at the man who had just helped me amputate my own toxic history, I realized something else. The silence wasn't just an ending, it was space. For the first time in my life, there was no noise. There were no demands. There was no Micah needing to be soothed. There was no Lydia needing to be pleased. There was just me and Cal and the date we had chosen. I picked up the red pen again and wrote a note next to the venue contract. Security required. We were going to war, but for the first time, I was fighting for the right side. The weeks that followed the drawing of the line were defined not by noise, but by a silence so profound it felt like I was living underwater. In the past, any conflict with my family would have resulted in a barrage of phone calls, guilt-tripping voicemails, and surprise visits to my apartment where my mother would weep on my sofa until I capitulated. But this time, there was nothing. No calls, no texts demanding an explanation, no flying monkeys sent to negotiate a truce. It was the silence of a shunning. They were freezing me out, waiting for the cold to become so unbearable that I would come crawling back to the warmth of their dysfunction. They assumed that without their approval, I would wither. They assumed that the wedding was a performance for them, and without an audience, I would cancel the show. They were wrong. For the first time in my life, I was not performing. I was planning. I stopped discussing the wedding with anyone who shared a last name with me. I did not block them, not yet. I let their messages sit in my inbox, unread, like specimens in a jar. Instead, Cal and I focused entirely on the 25 people who remained on our list. We called the Vineyard and spoke to Elena. We told her that we were pivoting. We did not want the sprawling evening reception anymore. We wanted something intimate, fierce, and undeniable. We shifted the timeline. The ceremony would still be at sunset, but the reception became a twilight candlelit dinner in the reserved tasting room, a space usually closed to the public. We upgraded everything. Since we were not feeding 80 people, we could afford the premium wine pairing for 25. We switched the menu from chicken breast to braised short ribs and truffle risotto. We fired the DJ my mother had tried to force on us and hired a string quartet that played cello covers of modern rock songs. It was no longer a wedding. It was a fortress of luxury. It felt like we were building a secret society where the only requirement for entry was genuine love for us. In the vacuum left by my own parents, Cal's parents, Hank and Martha, stepped in with a warmth that initially confused me. I was so used to parental affection being a transactional currency love given in exchange for compliance that I did not know what to do with affection that asked for nothing in return. One Tuesday evening, Martha came over with a casserole dish wrapped in foil. She did not ask about the drama. She did not ask if I had spoken to Lydia. She just set the food down on the counter and looked at the dark circles under my eyes. "Hank and I are so proud of you," she said simply. I blinked, fighting the sudden burn of tears. "For what I am wrecking the family dynamic." "For standing up," she corrected, pulling me into a hug that smelled like vanilla and rain. "We have watched you carry them for years, Lila. It is okay to put the load down. We are just glad you are finally walking your own path. We are here, whatever you need. If you need someone to walk you down the aisle." Hank bought a new suit yesterday just in case. He didn't want to ask, but he is ready. I held on to her, sobbing silently into her shoulder. I had spent my life trying to earn the title of a good daughter from people who would never grant it, while right in front of me, two people were offering me a place in their family for free. That weekend, I went dress shopping. Originally, this was supposed to be the main event. My mother had talked about it since I was 12. She wanted champagne. She wanted a retinue of bridesmaids. She wanted me in a princess ball gown that took up half the room, something that screamed spectacle. She wanted to cry when I came out of the dressing room, so she could tell her friends how emotional she was. I went to a small, high-end boutique in the city with only one person, my best friend, Maya. Maya had been my roommate in law school. She had seen me study for the bar exam until my eyes bled. She knew who I was when I wasn't being a daughter. "No tulle," I told the consultant, a sharp-eyed woman named Chloe. "No sequins, no drama. I want to look like a woman who owns the room, not a decoration." I tried on 4 dresses. The first 3 were beautiful, but they felt like costumes. Then I put on the 4th. It was a silk crepe sheath dress, minimalist and architectural, with a deep back and a structure that made me stand taller. It did not hide me. It did not overwhelm me. It just amplified me. I walked out to the podium. Maya did not scream. She did not clap. She just stopped drinking her mimosa and stood up, pulling out her phone. "Lila," she whispered, "that is it. That is the armor." She started filming, in the video, which I would watch later. I did not look like a bride who was missing her mother. I looked like a queen who had just survived a coup. There was a fierceness in my eyes that I didn't recognize. I bought the dress off the rack. I paid for it in full with my own credit card. There was no one there to critique the price, or the style, or ask if it would match the venue. There was just the quiet, terrifying satisfaction of making a choice that was entirely mine. As I was signing the receipt, my phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. But later, in the car, I saw the notification. It was a group message from Lydia. It included me, my aunts, my female cousins, and Savannah. "Just a heads up to all the ladies," Lydia wrote. "Since we are looking at relocating the wedding celebration to the spring, to ensure everyone can attend comfortably, I am going to hold off on the bridal shower planning for now. We want to make sure the timing is perfect. Love you all." I stared at the screen. Relocating. Spring. She wasn't just lying. She was rewriting reality in real time. She was telling the entire extended family that the wedding was off, without ever actually using the word canceled. She was framing it as a logistical delay, a mutual decision to ensure everyone can attend. It was brilliant. Evil PR. By the time October 14th arrived, if anyone asked why I wasn't there, she would just shrug and say I was being difficult about the new dates. But if I showed up at the vineyard on October 14th and got married, I would make her a liar. I didn't type a correction. I didn't reply. That is a lie. The wedding is still on. I realized that if I engaged, I gave her fuel. If I argued, I looked unstable. If I stayed silent, she would assume her narrative had taken hold. She would assume I had folded. She would assume the date was open for Savannah. Let her believe it. The rumors started trickling in at work a few days later. I worked at a large firm, but the circle of people who knew my family was tight. A paralegal named Jessica, who went to church with my aunt, cornered me in the break room while I was making coffee. "Hey, Lila," she said, her voice dropping to that sympathetic whisper people use for funerals. "I heard about the postponement. I am so sorry. It must be so stressful to have to move everything this close to the date." I watched the coffee drip into my mug. I could correct her. I could pull out my phone and show her the contracts. I could tell her that my mother was a manipulator who was gaslighting the entire tri-state area. But I was tired of explaining. I was tired of managing the optics of my family's insanity. I turned to Jessica and gave her a calm, enigmatic smile. "Family logistics are always complicated," I said smoothly. "But Cal and I are in a really good place. We are handling it." It wasn't a lie. We were handling it. We were handling it by cutting them out. "Oh, good," Jessica said, looking relieved to not have to navigate a breakdown. "Well, spring weddings are beautiful too." "They certainly are," I said, and walked back to my office. I sat at my desk and looked out the window at the city skyline. For the first time, I didn't feel the frantic urge to chase the truth. I didn't feel the need to call my aunt and scream. "I am getting married, she is lying." I realized that by letting them believe the wedding was moved, I was actually protecting the real wedding. If they thought I had surrendered, they wouldn't show up to protest. They wouldn't crash the ceremony. They would be at Micah's party, celebrating their victory, while I was 40 miles away, making vows to the only person who mattered. A dangerous thought flickered in my mind, a small flame that terrified and exhilarated me. What if I never corrected them? What if I let them believe I was waiting for spring? What if I got married, went on my honeymoon, and came back a wife, and simply never told them? What if I just exited the narrative entirely? I imagined a life where my phone didn't induce a panic attack. I imagined holidays where I didn't have to mediate arguments or apologize for things I didn't do. I imagined a future where my money, my time, and my energy belonged to me. It felt selfish. It felt cold. It felt exactly like the thing my mother had accused me of. And God, it felt good. I opened my email and saw a message from the vineyard. Final guest count. Confirmed 25. I hit reply. Confirmed. Proceed with the final invoice. I was not just planning a wedding anymore. I was planning an escape. The silence wasn't a punishment they were inflicting on me. It was a gift they had accidentally given me, and I was going to wrap my hands around it and never let go. The next time they heard my voice, it would not be to argue, it would be to say goodbye. But they didn't know that yet. To them, I was just the defeated daughter, licking her wounds in the dark. I closed my laptop, packed my bag, and walked out of the office a full hour early. For the first time in 29 years. I didn't check in with anyone. I just went home. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, not to the sound of an alarm, but to the violent pounding of my own heart against my ribs. For a disorienting second, I did not know where I was. The sheets were too high of a thread count to be my apartment, and the air smelled of cedar and lavender, not the city smog. Then the sunlight began to bleed through the heavy velvet curtains, illuminating the exposed wooden beams of the ceiling, and memory rushed back in. I was at the Stone Creek Inn, a mile down the road from the vineyard. It was October 14th. It was my wedding day. I sat up, clutching the duvet to my chest. The room was cold, the kind of crisp autumn chill that usually signaled cozy sweaters and hot cider. But right now, it felt like the temperature of dread. Beside me, Cal was still asleep, one arm thrown over his eyes, his breathing deep and steady. He looked peaceful. He looked like a man who was exactly where he was supposed to be. I, however, felt like a fugitive. I swung my legs out of bed and walked to the window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. Outside, the world was bathed in a thick gray mist that rolled off the vineyard hills. It was beautiful, haunting, and silent. But inside my head, the noise was deafening. The guilt hit me first. It was not a logical guilt. It was a somatic one, programmed into my nervous system after 29 years of conditioning. It squeezed my lungs, making it hard to draw a full breath. My brain started playing a highlight reel of worst-case scenarios. I imagined my mother in her kitchen right now, drinking coffee, checking her phone, waiting for my apology text. I imagined my father pacing, looking at the clock, wondering if I would really go through with it. I imagined Micah laughing, telling Savannah that I was probably crying alone in a hotel room because I had finally realized how selfish I was. A voice in the back of my head, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Lydia, whispered that I was being brutal. Who does this, it hissed. Who cuts off their own parents on their wedding day? Who forces a family to fracture like this? You are cold, Lila. You are cruel. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. My thumb hovered over the power button. I had the sudden, desperate urge to call them, to fix it, to apologize for being difficult, and ask if they would please just come to the ceremony. I wanted to tell them I would pay for a car, I would delay the start time, I would do anything just to stop feeling like I had committed a crime. Don't, the voice was rough with sleep, deep and grounding. I froze. I turned around to see Cal watching me. He wasn't asleep anymore. His eyes were clear, alert, as if he had sensed the spiral I was in from across the mattress. He sat up and patted the empty space beside him. Come here. I walked back to the bed and sat down. I was shaking. I feel sick. Cal, I feel like I'm doing something evil. They are my parents. Cal wrapped his arms around me, pulling me back against his chest. He was warm, solid, an anchor in the storm. You are not doing anything evil, he said, his voice rumbling against my back. You are getting married. That is it. That is the crime. But I excluded them, I whispered. I drew a line. You didn't draw the line, Lila, he said firmly. They did. They drew the line when they booked a party on time of your wedding. They drew the line when they tried to steal your guests. All you did was refuse to cross it. He turned me around so he could look me in the eyes. Listen to me, he said. You feel guilty because you have been trained to feel guilty whenever you do not give them what they want. That feeling in your chest, that is not your conscience speaking. That is their programming. You are not breaking anything, Lila. You are just stepping out of a trap. Stepping out of a trap. The image washed over me. I wasn't an executioner. I was an escape artist. The pain I was feeling wasn't the pain of inflicting a wound. It was the pain of a limb waking up after being asleep for decades. It was the pins and needles of circulation returning to a part of my soul I had cut off to survive them. I took a deep breath. Then another. The constriction in my chest loosened. Just a fraction. Okay, I said. I'm stepping out. Cal kissed my forehead. Good. Now, go take a shower. The girls will be here in an hour. And I promised your dad, my dad, that we would not be late. By 8 o'clock, the bridal suite was no longer a place of quiet dread. It was a war room of joy. Maya arrived first, carrying a garment bag and a crate of champagne. She was followed by two of my other close friends from law school, Sarah and Elena. They did not come with drama. They did not come with questions about my mother. They came with music, with steaming cups of coffee, and with an energy that was light, easy, and completely devoid of the tension I associated with family gatherings. Usually, getting ready for an event with my mother involved a constant stream of criticism. Stand up straight, suck in your stomach, that lipstick is too dark. Why is your hair doing that? It was a gauntlet of microaggressions that left me feeling ugly and small before I even walked out the door. This was different. Maya popped a bottle of champagne, the cork flying across the room and hitting the wall with a festive thwack. We laughed real, belly-shaking laughter that made my eyes water. We played bad 90s pop music. We ate pastries without worrying about bloating. The air was breathable. I sat in the makeup chair, letting the stylist work, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I was the protagonist of my own morning. I wasn't managing anyone's emotions. I wasn't checking to see if Micah was bored or if Mom was offended. I was just being. But I did one thing that confused Maya. "Why is your phone on the table?" she asked, gesturing to my device sitting face up next to the mimosa pitcher. "Do you want me to hide it or put it on airplane mode?" I looked at the black screen. "No," I said. "Leave it on. Sound on." Maya looked at me, her brow furrowed. "Lila, you know they are going to call. Do you really want that energy right now?" "I need to know," I said, my voice steady. "I need to know that I can hear it ringing and choose not to answer. If I turn it off, I am hiding. If I leave it on, I am deciding." Maya nodded slowly. "Okay, power move. I respect it." The first call came at 9:15. The phone vibrated against the wooden table. A harsh, buzzing insect sound that cut through the music. The screen lit up. "Mom." The room went silent. My friends looked at me. The stylist paused with her brush. I looked at the screen. I watched the name pulse. Mom, Mom, Mom. In the past, that name flashing on my screen would have triggered an immediate Pavlovian response. I would have snatched it up. Apology already on my lips, desperate to diffuse whatever crisis was brewing. I took a sip of my mimosa. I watched the phone ring until it went to voicemail. "That is one," I said. The second call came 3 minutes later. "Dad. He never called. He only called if someone had died or if Mom was making him do it." My stomach gave a small, traitorous lurch, but I forced myself to remember the silence at the dinner table. I remembered him watching me walk out into the rain without saying a word. I let it ring. Then the deluge started. Micah, then Mom again, then Micah, then a text message that previewed on the screen, "Lila. Pick up the phone. This is ridiculous. People are asking where you are. They weren't calling to wish me luck. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because they had realized I wasn't playing the game. They were calling because they were losing control. And panic was setting in. They are realizing I am not coming to their party," I said to the room. "Their loss," Sarah said, clinking her glass against the bottle. "More champagne for us." By 10:30, the phone had rung 14 times. I had not touched it once. With every ignored call, the invisible cord that tethered me to them stretched thinner and thinner. I was waiting for it to snap. At 11 o'clock, there was a knock on the bridal suite door. It wasn't room service. It was Elena, the venue coordinator. She looked impeccable in her black suit, but her face was tight. She stepped inside and closed the door softly behind her. "Lila," she said, her voice low and professional. "I am sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation at the main gate." My heart hammered. "Is it them?" "Not your parents," Elena said. "But we have 3 vehicles trying to gain access. The occupants claim they are guests for the Barnes wedding. They are saying there must be a mistake, that they were told the wedding was canceled or moved. But they wanted to drive by and check because, well, apparently there are rumors." I walked to the window. I couldn't see the gate from here, but I could imagine it. People who had been told by my mother that the wedding was off, but who perhaps suspected something was wrong. Or maybe they were spies sent by Savannah to confirm if I was actually going through with it. "Who are they?" I asked. One couple identified themselves as your Aunt Carol and Uncle Bob. Elena said. "Another is a cousin, I believe Mark." I closed my eyes. Aunt Carol, the town crier. Cousin Mark, the live streamer. "They are demanding to see you," Elena continued. "They are saying they are family and they have a right to come in. They are quite agitated. They keep saying your mother told them you were having a mental health crisis." The room went deadly quiet. Maya stood up, her face furious. "A mental health crisis? Are you kidding me?" I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same clarity I had felt in the courtroom restroom. My mother had played her final card. She had tried to paint me as unstable to explain my absence at her party. She had weaponized my sanity to protect her image. "They are not on the list," I said. Elena nodded. They are not. Then they do not come in, I said. My voice did not shake. I don't care who they are. I don't care if they are blood relatives. The list is the list. If they are not on it, they are trespassing. Elena's shoulders relaxed. She had been waiting for me to waver, to cave to the pressure of family. She smiled. A sharp, approving expression. Understood, she said. I have off-duty police officers at the gate. We will turn them away. They will be told that this is a private event and they are not authorized to enter. If they refuse to leave, they will be escorted off the property. Do it, I said. Elena turned to leave, but stopped at the door. One more thing, Leela. Your cousin Mark. He tried to fly a drone over the hedge. And security confiscated it, she said. We don't allow unauthorized aerial surveillance. She left the room. I stood by the window, trembling slightly, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. It was the physical sensation of a boundary becoming real. For 29 years, my boundaries had been suggestions. They had been lines drawn in sand that my family trampled over whenever it suited them. Today, my boundary was a steel gate with armed security guards. I turned back to the room. My friends were watching me, silent, waiting to see if I would crumble. I looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. I was wearing a silk robe. My hair was half-pinned. I looked like a bride. But more importantly, I looked like a woman who was unreachable. My phone buzzed again. Mom. I picked it up. I didn't answer it. I didn't turn it off. I simply walked over to the trash can in the corner of the room. I looked at the buzzing screen one last time. I saw the manipulation, the guilt, the obligation, the years of being second best, the years of being the umbrella for their storm. I dropped the phone into the trash can. It landed with a dull thud on top of a pile of used tissues and champagne corks. Maya, I said, turning to my best friend. I think I am ready to put on my dress. The tension in the room broke. The music swelled. The sunlight poured through the window. Bright and unfiltered, I exhaled, a long, deep breath that emptied my lungs of the old air. I was safe. They couldn't get to me. The gate was closed. And for the first time in my life, the only people inside the walls were the ones who wanted me to be happy. The late afternoon sun had turned the vineyard into a painting of gold and russet by the time I stepped out of the bridal suite. The heavy mist from the morning had burned off completely, leaving the air crisp and smelling of crushed grapes and cooling earth. It was the kind of light that photographers pray for, a rich, honeyed glow that seemed to soften the edges of the world. I stood in the vestibule of the main house, listening to the string quartet begin the opening notes of a cello arrangement of a song Cal and I loved. It was deep, resonant, and hauntingly beautiful. Through the French doors, I could see the ceremony site. It was set in a small clearing between the oldest vines on the property. There were no rows of empty chairs to mark the absence of the people I had cut from my life. We had arranged the 25 chairs in a tight semicircle facing the altar, creating a nest of intimacy. Everyone there was someone who knew the sound of my real laugh. Everyone there was a safe harbor. Hank, Cal's father, stood beside me. He looked uncomfortable in his new suit, tugging slightly at his cuffs, but his eyes were bright with an emotion I recognized as fierce protectiveness. He did not try to fill the silence with platitudes. He did not tell me I looked pretty or that everything would be fine. He just offered me his arm, his elbow crooking out at a sharp, sturdy angle. "You ready, kiddo?" he asked, his voice gruff. I looked at him. I thought about my own father, who was likely sitting in a car somewhere or standing at a party I refused to attend, paralyzed by his own passivity. I felt a sharp pang of loss, but it was swift, like a paper cut, and then it was gone. "I am ready," I said. I took his arm. The music swelled, the cello carrying the melody up into the canopy of the oak trees. We stepped out onto the grass. The moment I appeared, the 25 guests stood up. There was no polite murmuring, no critical scanning of my dress or my hair. There was just a collective intake of breath, a wave of genuine warmth that hit me physically. I saw Maya wiping her eyes. I saw Cal's mother, Martha, clutching a handkerchief to her mouth, beaming, and then I saw Cal. He was standing beneath the archway of woven vines and white roses. He was not looking at the guests. He was not looking at his watch. He was looking at me with an intensity that made the rest of the world blur into the background. His hands were clasped in front of him, and I could see his knuckles were white. When our eyes locked, his shoulders dropped an inch, as if he had been holding his breath until this exact second. I started to walk. The grass was soft beneath my feet. Every step felt like a reclamation. With every yard I crossed, I was leaving behind the version of myself that was a daughter, a fixer, a doormat, an apology. I was walking toward a version of myself that was a wife, a partner, and a woman who knew the word no. I did not look back. The impulse was there, a phantom reflex to check over my shoulder, to see if my mother was rushing up behind me to correct my posture, or if Micah was there to demand attention. But I kept my eyes forward, fixed on Cal. I knew what was behind me. Behind me was a lifetime of conditional love. Ahead of me was the condition of freedom. When we reached the altar, Hank patted my hand once, a solid, grounding tap, and then placed my hand in Cal's. "Take care of her," Hank whispered to his son, "or I will kick your ass." Cal laughed, a wet, choked sound. "I know, Dad." Hank stepped back, and it was just us. The officiant, a close friend named David who had known us both since the CPR training days, began the ceremony. He did not talk about two families joining together, because that would have been a lie. He talked about two people building a new world. He talked about the resilience of vines, how they have to struggle through rocky soil to produce the best fruit, how the struggle makes the wine complex and valuable. It felt intimate and fierce. The wind rustled the leaves, providing a natural applause to David's words. I felt grounded, my heels sinking slightly into the earth, my hands sweating in Cal's grip. Then it was time for the vows. We had written our own. I pulled a small, folded piece of paper from the pocket of my dress, a detail I had insisted on for exactly this reason. My hands were shaking, but my voice, when I began to speak, was clear. "Cal," I said, looking directly into his dark eyes. For a long time, I thought love was a transaction. I thought it was something I had to earn by being useful, by being silent, by making myself small so others could be big. I took a breath. I heard a sniffle from the audience. "I promise you today that I will never shrink for you," I continued. "I promise to be your partner, not your manager. I promise to let you carry me when I'm tired, and to carry you when you are weak, but never to carry the weight of the world alone again. I promise partnership without self-erasure. I choose you, not because I need you to fix me, but because you are the only person who never asked me to be broken." Cal wiped a tear from his cheek with his thumb. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Lila, I promise to protect the space you take up," he said. "I promise to be the wall you can lean on, not the wall that boxes you in. I promise that in this marriage, your feelings will never be secondary. You are my primary. You are my only." "By the power vested in me," David said, his voice booming with joy. "I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Cal didn't hesitate. He pulled me in, and the kiss was not polite or staged. It was desperate and triumphant. It was the seal on a treaty we had written in blood and ink. Cheers exploded around us, not the polite golf clap of a society wedding, but raucous, shouting cheers. Maya pumped her fist in the air. Hank let out a whoop. The string quartet launched into a joyous, upbeat melody. We turned to face our guests, hands raised, and walked back up the aisle. I felt lightheaded, dizzy with the sheer volume of happiness crashing over me. We had done it. We had actually done it. We walked straight through the garden and into the tasting room, where the staff was waiting with trays of champagne. We had a 10-minute window while the guests transitioned for cocktail hour, a moment for just the two of us to breathe. Elena, the planner, was waiting for us in the shadowed hallway leading to the reserve room. She was holding 2 glasses of champagne, but her expression was serious. She looked like a general who had just returned from the front lines. "Congratulations," she said, handing us the glasses. "You did it. It was beautiful." "Thank you, Elena," I said, taking a long sip. The bubbles tasted like victory. "Everything was perfect." "It was," she agreed. She glanced at Cal, then back at me. "I have a situation report. If you want it now, or I can wait until tomorrow." I looked at Cal. The adrenaline was still humming in my veins. I felt invincible. "Tell me," I said. "I want to know." Elena took a breath and checked her clipboard, as if verifying the details of a battle. At 4:30, just as the processional music started, a black SUV attempted to bypass the secondary security checkpoint, she said. The driver demanded access to the upper vineyard. My stomach tightened, but it wasn't fear. It was curiosity. "Who was it?" "Your mother," Elena said calmly. "And your brother, and a woman I assume is Savannah?" "What did they do?" Cal asked, his arm tightening around my waist. "Lydia got out of the car." Elena recounted. She was extremely agitated. She demanded to speak to the person in charge. She kept saying that she was the mother of the bride and that she had the authority to override the vendor contracts. She told the head of security that there had been a misunderstanding and that she needed to get inside to fix the setup before the guests arrived. I laughed. It was a dark, incredulous sound. She thought she could just walk in and rearrange my wedding while I was walking down the aisle. She thought she was still the manager. "What did security say?" I asked. "They told her that the person in charge was Lila Barnes." "Excuse me, Lila Bennett," Elena corrected with a small smile. "And that Lila Bennett had given strict instructions that no unauthorized persons were to be admitted. They told her she was not on the access list." "Did she leave?" "Not immediately," Elena said. "She tried to argue that you were having a mental breakdown and that she was your medical proxy. She actually tried to use legal terms, but then your brother got involved." I could imagine it. Micah, the fragile storm. "Micah got out of the car and started screaming at the guards," Elena said, her voice dropping a register to convey the absurdity of it. "He yelled that this was his day too, and that you were ruining his engagement party. He demanded that I come out personally so he could order me to, and I quote, shut it down. He wanted the music stopped. He wanted the guests dispersed. He seemed to think that if he yelled loud enough, the wedding would just evaporate." "And Savannah?" I asked. "She stayed in the car," Elena said. "She was filming it on her phone." Of course she was. Content. "So, what happened?" Cal asked. "The head of security, Mr. Henderson, is a retired state trooper," Elena said. "He does not have a lot of patience for tantrums. He gave them one warning to vacate the private property. When Micah tried to push past him to get to the gate, Mr. Henderson physically escorted him back to the vehicle. He told them that if they did not turn around immediately, he would call the county sheriff and have them arrested for trespassing and harassment." Elena paused, allowing the image to sink in. My mother, the queen of appearances, being threatened with arrest in a gravel driveway. Micah, the golden boy, being manhandled by a security guard. "They left," Elena finished. "They turned around and drove off. I believe I heard your mother screaming at your father who was driving to do something, but he just drove away." Silence hung in the hallway for a moment. I closed my eyes. I could see it all so clearly. The desperation, the entitlement, the absolute shock that their keys no longer worked in my locks. I felt a wave of grief wash over me. It was heavy and cold, standing in stark contrast to the warmth of the champagne. I grieved for the mother who should have been adjusting my veil, not arguing with a security guard. I grieved for the brother who should have been toasting me, not trying to shut me down. I grieved for the father who drove the getaway car. It hurt. It would always hurt, like a bone that had healed crooked. But then I opened my eyes and looked at Cal. He was watching me, his face full of concern, ready to catch me if I fell. I looked at Elena, who had defended my peace with the ferocity of a lioness. I heard the laughter of my friends coming from the tasting room. They were outside the gate. I was inside. The grief was there, yes, but it was just a shadow. The joy was the light, and the light was blinding. "Thank you, Elena," I said. "Please tell Mr. Henderson there is a bonus coming his way." "I will," she said. "Now, go eat your dinner. The risotto is perfect." She walked away, her heels clicking on the stone floor. I turned to Cal. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the vineyard, the scent of the future. "They tried to stop it," I said, "and they failed." "They failed completely," Cal said. "I am not sad," I said, realizing it was true. "I am relieved. It is over. Cal, the waiting is over. They showed me exactly who they are, and I showed them exactly who I am." "And who are you?" Cal asked, a smile playing on his lips. "I am the woman who just got married," I said, "and I am starving." I took his hand. "Let's go join the party." We walked out of the shadows and into the warm, candlelit glow of the tasting room. As we crossed the threshold, the applause started again, loud and loving and real. I squeezed Cal's hand, and I stepped fully into the joy I had chosen. The gates were closed, the bridge was burned, and the view from here was magnificent. We slipped away from the reception at 9:45 in the evening, leaving behind a scene that felt less like a party ending and more like a memory being gilded in gold. The string quartet was playing a slow, resonant waltz, and our 25 guests were finishing the last of the red wine, their laughter drifting into the cool night air. We did not do a grand exit. We did not have sparklers or a tunnel of cheering friends. We simply squeezed Maya's hand, hugged Cal's parents one last time, and walked out the side door to the waiting town car. It felt like a heist. We had stolen our own happiness right out from under the nose of a family that believed they owned the copyright to it. As I slid into the back seat, the leather cool against my bare arms, the adrenaline that had sustained me through the ceremony began to ebb, replaced by a profound, heavy exhaustion. It was the kind of tiredness that settles in your bones after you have carried a heavy load for too long and finally set it down. Cal climbed in beside me, loosening his tie with one hand and pulling me close with the other. "We did it," he whispered, pressing a kiss to my temple. "We did," I replied. The driver pulled away from the vineyard, the gravel crunching softly under the tires. I watched the lights of the tasting room fade in the rearview mirror until they were just pinpricks against the dark wall of the forest. With every mile we put between us and the venue, the physical sensation of the boundary I had erected became more tangible. But the digital world was not so easily left behind. My phone, which I had retrieved from the trash can in the bridal suite before we left a practical necessity for travel. Not an emotional capitulation, began to vibrate against my thigh. It started as a single buzz, then another, then a continuous, angry hum that made the silk of my dress tremble. I looked down. The screen was lighting up the dark interior of the car like a strobe light. Mom, Micah, Dad, Aunt Carol, Cousin Mark, they were awake, they were home, and they were realizing that the security guard at the gate had not been a bluff. "Do not look at it," Cal said gently, reaching for my hand. "I am not looking at the messages," I said, flipping the phone face down on my lap. "But I know what is happening. The shock has worn off. Now comes the rage." We drove straight to a small regional airport about 40 minutes south of the vineyard. We had booked a charter flight to the Caribbean, an extravagance we paid for by cutting the guest list by 70%. It was the best money we had ever spent. There were no lines, no TSA agents shouting about laptops, no crowds of people to witness the bride still wearing her wedding dress, albeit with a denim jacket thrown over it now. As we walked across the tarmac to the small jet, the wind whipping my hair across my face, I felt like a fugitive in a noir film. We were escaping the jurisdiction of the Barnes family insanity. Once we were settled in the cream-colored seats and the pilot announced our flight time, I pulled my phone out one last time before we took off. I needed to do one thing: I opened Instagram. The algorithm, helpful as always, had pushed Micah's latest post to the top of my feed. He had posted it 20 minutes ago. It was a photo of him and Savannah standing in what looked like my parents' living room. Savannah was wiping a tear almost certainly staged from her cheek. Micah looked furious, staring into the camera lens as if he were trying to intimidate the internet. The caption was a masterclass in narcissism. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of love. Instead, my own sister chose to ruin it. She locked us out of her exclusive event, called the police on her own mother, and humiliated us. I have never felt so betrayed. Some people are so selfish they would burn down their own family just to be the center of attention. Sad. I felt a spike of old panic. He is spinning the narrative. My brain whispered, he is winning. But then I looked at the comments. Usually, Micah's feed was an echo chamber of Savannah's friends and my mother's cronies validating his victimhood. But this time, something had shifted. The sheer audacity of his claim that I had ruined his party by having my own wedding on my own date had apparently broken the suspension of disbelief for even the most casual observer. Wait, a comment from a high school friend read, "Didn't Lila have this date booked for like 2 years? I thought you guys booked your party last month." So let me get this straight. Another comment said, this one from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "You tried to crash her wedding, got kicked out. And now you are saying, she ruined your night, dude. Read the room." I saw Lila's friend posted a video of the ceremony. A third comment read, "She looked happy. You look kind of unhinged. Man, let her be." The fractures were happening in real time. My silence, coupled with his loud, chaotic aggression, was doing more damage to his reputation than any defense I could have written. He was exposing himself. "Lila," Cal said, buckling his seatbelt. "We are taxiing." I looked at the screen one last time. The notifications were still pouring in, a mix of Micah's defenders attacking me and neutral parties asking what on earth was going on. I swiped down and tapped the airplane icon. Airplane mode on. The buzzing stopped. The notifications vanished. The digital cord was severed. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. For the next 4 hours, I was unreachable. I was unsummonable. I was free. We landed in Turks and Caicos, just as the sun was beginning to threaten the eastern horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and pink. The air that hit us when the cabin door opened was thick, humid, and smelled of salt and hibiscus. It was the scent of a different world. We took a car to the villa we had rented. It was a small, secluded house on a cliff overlooking the water, far away from the resorts and the noise. When we walked inside, I felt the tension finally drain out of my shoulders, leaving me feeling loose and fluid. But I knew I had one last piece of administrative work to do before I could truly disappear. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed and took my phone out of my purse. Cal was in the kitchen opening a bottle of water. He poked his head around the corner. "Are you going back in?" he asked. "Just for a minute," I said. "I'm not arguing. I am closing the file." I turned off airplane mode. The phone convulsed. It vibrated so hard, it almost slipped out of my hand. The messages flooded in, a torrent of digital abuse that had backed up while we were in the air. I scrolled through them, detaching myself from the words. I read them not as a daughter, but as a compliance analyst reviewing a hostile audit. From Lydia, "I have never been so ashamed in my life. You had security manhandle your brother. You threatened to arrest me after everything we have done for you. You are dead to us until you apologize. Do not expect to be welcome at Christmas." From Dad Lila, "Your mother is hysterical. You really hurt her. I don't understand why you had to be so extreme. Please call us." From Micah, "You are a psycho. Savannah is crying. I hope you are happy. You stole my night. You are going to pay for this." From Aunt Carol, "I drove 2 hours to see you and was turned away like a criminal. Disgusting behavior." Lila, "There were dozens more. Guilt trips, threats, feigned confusion. It was a cacophony of dysfunction, all designed to pull me back into the fray, to make me defend myself, to make me explain, to make me beg for forgiveness. I did not feel guilty. I felt bored. I realized that explaining myself to them was like trying to explain quantum physics to a goldfish. They lacked the hardware to understand a world where they were not the center of the universe. I opened my photo gallery. I found a picture Maya had texted me right before we took off. It was a candid shot from the moment we walked back up the aisle. Cal and I were laughing, our hands raised in the air, the golden light of the vineyard washing over us. We looked triumphant. We looked untouchable. I opened Instagram. I did not tag Micah. I did not tag my mother. I did not write a paragraph explaining the timeline or the contracts or the lies. I uploaded the photo, caption married. That was it. No defense, no drama, just the undeniable fact of my joy. Then, I opened the group text thread, the one with Mom, Dad, and Micah, the one that was currently filled with their vitriol. I drafted a response. I kept it surgical. I kept it cold. Cal and I are married. We are currently on our honeymoon. We will not be checking our phones. To clarify the events of yesterday, we held a private ceremony on the date we booked 18 months ago. Security was enforced because uninvited guests attempted to disrupt the event. We will not apologize for protecting our wedding. We will not be responding to further negativity. If the harassment continues, we will block these numbers permanently. We hope you find peace. I read it over. It was perfect. It was a boundary made of concrete. I hit send. I watched the bubbles appear instantly. They were typing. They were ready to explode again. They were ready to argue that I was lying, that I was cruel, that I was ungrateful. I didn't give them the chance. I held down the power button on the side of my phone. Slide to power off. I slid my finger across the screen. The screen went black. The little white spinning wheel appeared for a second, and then, nothing. The phone was a dead brick in my hand. I placed it in the drawer of the nightstand and slid it shut. Done, Cal asked. He was standing in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of juice, wearing nothing but his swim trunks. Behind him, through the open glass doors, I could hear the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the cliffs. Done, I said. I stood up. I felt lighter than I had ever felt in my life. The noise was gone. The expectations were gone. The heavy, suffocating mantle of being the good daughter was gone, left in a trash can in a bridal suite, left in a drawer in the Caribbean. What do you want to do now? Cal asked. I looked at him. I looked at the ocean. I looked at the vast, empty space of the rest of my life, a space that was finally mine to fill. I want to go swimming, I said. I walked toward him, leaving the drawer closed, leaving the family chaos in the dark where it belonged. I walked out onto the terrace and into the sun. We stayed in Turks and Caicos for 10 days. For the first 7. My phone remained powered off. Sitting in the bottom of the nightstand drawer like a dormant grenade I had no intention of pulling the pin on. We existed in a bubble of turquoise water, white sand, and a silence so profound it felt medicinal. I slept for 12 hours a night. I ate fresh fruit without counting calories. I laughed with Cal until my sides ached, realizing that without the crushing weight of my family's expectations, my natural state was not anxiety, but joy. But I knew the bubble had to pop eventually. We could not live on the island forever, and I needed to face the fallout one last time before I could truly close the door. On our final evening, while Cal was showering for dinner, I opened the drawer. I took out the phone. My hand did not shake this time. The terror that had defined my life for 29 years, the fear of their disapproval, the fear of their anger, the fear of being unlovable had been burned away by the Caribbean sun. I was not opening the phone to ask for forgiveness. I was opening it to issue a verdict. I powered it on. The notifications did not just trickle in. They detonated. There were hundreds of missed calls, voicemails, and text messages. The sheer volume was a testament to their panic. When the designated problem solver quits, the people who rely on her to fix their lives do not just get mad, they get desperate. I bypassed the general noise and went straight to the texts from the 3 architects of my trauma: Lydia, my father, and Micah. Lydia's messages had shifted from the initial rage of the wedding day to a cold, martyred victimhood. You have abandoned this family, she wrote in a message sent 2 days ago. I do not know who you are anymore. to leave us standing outside a gate like criminals, to humiliate your brother, and now to disappear without a word. You are punishing us. Lila, you are cruel. After everything we sacrificed to raise you, this is how you repay us, by abandoning us when we needed you to be the bigger person. I read the words, and for the first time, they did not sting. They just looked desperate. She used the word abandon because she knew it was my trigger. She knew I prided myself on being loyal, on being the one who stayed. But I realize now that she did not mean I had abandoned them emotionally. She meant I had abandoned my post. I had quit my job as her emotional punching bag, and she was furious that the position was vacant. Then I opened the message from my father. It was sent at 3 a.m, a solitary text that stood out from the others. Lila. He wrote, I am sorry. I sat there in the car, and I watched them scream at the guards, and I wanted to get out and tell them to stop. I wanted to tell them that you deserved your day, but I didn't. I didn't know how to stop it. I have never known how to stop your mother. I am ashamed that I let it get this far. I love you. I felt a pang of sadness for him, but it was a distant, pitying sadness. His apology was real. I believed that, but it was also useless. He admitted he didn't know how to stop it, which was a lie. He knew how. He was just too cowardly to endure the discomfort of doing it. He had sacrificed my protection to keep his own peace, and while I could forgive him, I could not rely on him. An apology without a change in behavior is just a manipulation. Finally, I checked Micah. His messages were a stream of consciousness tantrum. You stole the attention, he wrote. That is all this was. You couldn't stand that Savannah and I were going to have a better party, so you staged this whole exclusive wedding thing to make us look bad. You are so jealous. Lila, it is pathetic. You ruined my engagement. I hope you are happy. I stared at the screen, marveling at the projection. You stole the attention. He was 26 years old, yet he sounded like a toddler whose birthday cake had been dropped. He genuinely believed that my wedding, an event planned for 18 months, was a strategic strike against him. He was the sun, and any planet that dared to have its own gravity was a threat. I looked at the 3 threads: the accuser, the enabler, the narcissist. I tapped block caller for Micah. I stared at the phone. It was done. It was not an act of spite. I did not feel a rush of vengeance. I felt the quiet, clinical satisfaction of a surgeon who has successfully removed a gangrenous limb. It was preservation. I was not blocking them to hurt them. I was blocking them to save the tissue of my new life from infection. Cal walked out of the bathroom, steam billowing around him, a towel slung low on his hips. He saw me holding the phone. He saw the look on my face, not tears, but a strange, serene focus. Is it done? He asked. It is done, I said. I blocked them, all of them. Cal stopped drying his hair. He looked at me with a mixture of pride and relief. How does it feel? I thought about it. I closed my eyes and scanned my body for the guilt I had carried for so long. I looked for the knot in my stomach, the tightness in my chest, the voice in my head telling me I was a bad daughter. They were gone. In their place was the sound of the ocean and the beating of my own heart. It feels, I said, opening my eyes, like I can finally breathe. We went to dinner at a small table set up on the sand, illuminated by tiki torches in the starlight. The waiter poured us wine, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore filled the silence between us, a silence that was comfortable, not heavy. I looked at Cal across the table. The candlelight flickered in his dark eyes. He was my husband. He was the man who had stood by me while I dismantled my entire history. He was the family I had chosen. He raised his glass. To the future, he said softly. I shook my head, smiling. No, better. I raised my glass to meet his. To the day we decided our happiness requires no permission, I said. Cal smiled. That slow, warm smile that made my knees weak. To no permission. We clinked glasses. The crystal rang out, a clear, bell-like sound that seemed to carry out over the water. As I took a sip of the wine, I allowed myself to imagine the future. I saw us going back home, not to the drama, but to our quiet apartment. I saw holidays spent with his parents, or maybe just the two of us, eating Chinese takeout and watching movies without the dread of a mandatory family dinner. I saw a life where my phone was a tool for connection, not a leash. I saw a career where I solved problems for money, not for love. I saw peace. It occurred to me then that my mother was right about one thing. She had said the family could not survive selfishness. She was right. The parasitic version of our family, the one that fed on my submission, could not survive my selfishness, my self-preservation. It had to die so that I could live. I looked out at the dark horizon, where the sea met the sky. I thought about all the women who were currently sitting in their cars, or in bathroom stalls, or in their childhood bedrooms, staring at a text message from a parent that made them feel small and sick. I thought about the people who were holding their breath, waiting for permission to exist. I wanted to tell them that the fear is a lie. I wanted to tell them that the world does not end when you say no. The world begins. My final thought landed in my mind like a vow, solid and unbreakable as the diamond on my finger. People who relied on your silence will call you cruel the first time you speak. They will call you cold. They will call you selfish. They will tell you that you have changed, as if change is a crime and not a survival instinct. But you are not cruel. You are finally awake, and the morning is beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it resonated with you, especially if you have ever had to draw a hard line to protect your own peace. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and let me know which country or city you are listening from, and share your own thoughts on Lila's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Helena Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. Your support means the world. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.